helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, certified Christian counselor and director of Ottawa's Elam Counselling Services.
Hi, this is Michael Hart of Elam Counselling Services, and I want to thank you for joining us on this episode of the Life Transformation Radio Show. As usual, we have another interesting show lined up for you, but before we begin today, I would like to talk about Elam Counselling Services and tell listeners who we are, just in case there are listeners joining us for the first time. Elam Counselling Services is a professional counseling organization. We're a non-profit organization that offer counseling at subsidized rates and for people who might not be able to afford it. And most of our services are covered by insurance companies. So if you're there, you're government work or you have a benefit plan at work and you're wondering whether or not you can use this plan if you contact Elam Counselling Services, the answer is yes in most cases. We have no problem with most of the major insurance companies. So if you are thinking of getting help and cost is an issue, you can use your insurance benefit to get to access the services at Elam Counselling Services. We are different than other counseling services in that we approach counseling from a Christian perspective. That doesn't mean that we are judgmental or we preach down to anyone, just that we stand on the principles of Scripture, and we believe that the spiritual can be a very important part of someone's life. So if you've been going to other places and where you feel as if your faith has been minimized and that your counselor does not understand the spiritual implication of what you're going through, then be mindful of the fact that at Elam our counselors are trained to understand the spiritual aspect that might be a part of the issue that you're dealing with. So again, I want to thank you for joining us on today's episode, in which we'll be talking about overcoming intense emotional pain. And with me today in studio is Melissa Waggett. Melissa, thank you for joining us today.
It's always a pleasure getting to come in studio with you, Michael, and to talk about these important topics that we do each week. And I think the other thing you wanted to bring up to listeners as well is, not surprisingly, you're a very busy man. And there's another event coming up in a few weeks in Cornwall that you had mentioned to me prior to the show that you wanted to make sure the listeners were aware of, that they can take advantage of if they're in the Cornwall area. So, Michael, do you mind telling us what is going on in Cornwall and how Elam Counselling Services is involved?
Well, there are two things happening in Cornwall. The first of which is that Elam is expanding. We are starting a branch in Cornwall due to popular request in that area. We have a team of ministers in the Cornwall area who have been after us to set up a branch so that people in the Cornwall area could have access there. So this ministerium has contacted me several times, and I have met with the head of the ministerium, and we have agreed to launch a practice in the Cornwall area. The facilities is set up for us, and we will be starting. We'll start to see clients in the Cornwall area. So for you listeners there in Cornwall, yes, Elam will be coming to Cornwall. The second thing that is happening is that as part of the launch, we'll be having a conference on a seminar on the 26th of November. The conference is on the 26th of November, and it's from 7 to 8:30 p.m. The conference will be on overcoming negative generational influence. So we will be speaking about negative generational influence and how to overcome those generational influences. So if you are struggling with something that you identify as being a trend that is going on from generation to generation, come on out to this seminar, because we will be giving very important tools and tips as to how to break those generational influence.
And so is there a cost associated with this seminar?
Well, so far there's no cost. There's a cost to the church that is hosting it, of course, but we will not be charging for this seminar. It's a free seminar that people can attend.
And do they need to sign up beforehand?
Absolutely. As usual, seating is very limited. And when I say very limited, it's even more limited than the conference that we had, the last conference in which we had over 200 people. This will, I imagine, will be a much smaller place. So if you're in Ottawa and you'd like to get out to Cornwall to come to this seminar, then give us a call and let us see if there is still space available. If you're in Cornwall, don't take it for granted, because I can assure you that these spots are going to go very quickly. The last conference that we had in the first week of advertising the conference, we had over 80 people registered, and we had planned for 50 people for the conference. So we had to expand the venue to host the 200 plus people that we had. So don't delay, don't procrastinate. We might have a show on procrastination at another time to deal with those people who called me at the last minute, the day before the conference, saying, "Is there still space? Can I still come?" Luckily, we were able to add a few chairs at the last minute to accommodate some of those last minute people who came to the last conference.
So take advantage of this and give Elam Counseling Services a call, and make sure that you have your spot reserved. And to get a hold of us, we have our website, elamcounselingministries.com, as well as our phone number. And for the life of me, I can't remember right now. There you go, Michael.
613-699-1677. 613-699-1677. So you can get a hold of us by any of those means, and we would love to hear from you. If you have a comment, a question, a request, feel free to give us a call. Feel free to interact with us on our social media page by accessing our Facebook, our Twitter account at the Elam Counseling Ministry.com. And again, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Life Transformation Radio Show. So to today's show, overcoming intense emotional pain, I think this is a topic that I think is going to touch a lot of listeners out there, because I know that there are people who will be listening to this show who have gone through maybe the death of a loved one, been betrayed by a spouse, have children who have turned against them, be betrayed by co-workers, had their heart broken by a lover. And regardless of what the situation is, I think they are going to be able to identify with what we talk about, the pain that is expressed in this show, and be able to benefit from the tips that we'll be giving at the end of this show as well.
Mm-hmm. And as always with the radio show here, we always like to go back to the scriptures, and it's something that you do in your counseling service as well, because we really find truths that are expressed there that we can apply to our lives today. And there's a lot we can learn. It's like the first textbook on psychotherapy almost. I think sometimes the things you grab out of it, Michael, that we can really apply to our lives today. So today's verse is taken from Psalm 55, and it's a Psalm of David. And do you mind reading it out there for the listeners, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll read Psalm 55, and just about from verse 2 to verse 8. And it's a psalm that's written by David, who is going through intense emotional pain. As you listen to the words of this psalm, you will understand that David is indeed going through intense pain. Quote, "My thoughts trouble me, and I am distraught because of what my enemy is saying, because of the threats of the wicked. For they bring down suffering on me and assail me in their anger. My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen on me. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me. I said, oh, that I had the wings of a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. I would fly far away and stay in the desert. I would hurry to my place of shelter, far from the tempest and storm." So as we, unquote. So as we listen to this passage, we are seeing that there is we can hear the pain that David is going through. He talks about my thoughts trouble me. He talks about my heart is in anguish within me. He says fear and trembling have beset me. And he in the last part of the verses that we read in 7 and 8, he expresses this wish that he would fly away, that if he could just get away from the tempest and storm that's going on. So you might be listening to us as we talk about this topic today, as I've read this passage, and you're saying, this sounds like me. I am in the middle of a situation right now that I wish that I could escape from. I am going through a trial right now that I wish that I could just fly away from and be at rest. I would like you to stay tuned to this show, because we are going to be talking about practical things that can be of help to you, but we're also going to be giving some of the don'ts, some of the things that you don't want to be doing as you try to deal with the pain, the intense pain that you're going through. So overcoming intense emotional pain is a topic of this show today, and we're going to be showing you how to do just that.
So as you said, Michael, there's a lot we can glean from this verse. So to start breaking it down right off the top, the first line really strikes me. My thoughts trouble me and I am distraught. And in this psalm, we hear David talking about how his thoughts trouble him. And it's something that I think we still hear a lot today, people's thoughts troubling them. How do thoughts actually trouble people? What are you seeing in your practice, and what are the types of things people are going through?
There are a number of ways in which thoughts can become a problem. For some people who are going through stressful situations, there can be what has been called racing thoughts, where they've come to the end of the day. Their body has slowed down. They're now lying in bed and they're seeking to go to sleep, but the mind doesn't stop. There is a racing of thoughts where their mind keeps going over and over and over about the situation, and they just can't get any rest, because it's as if they're trying to turn it off, but the thoughts are coming so frequently that they just can't get any rest. And there's also what we call rumination and issues, where if it's a specific situation, not just a general stress in life where the mind is racing about a number of different things, but on a particular issue, let us say someone who has been dumped by a spouse, or a boyfriend or girlfriend, someone is within a romantic relationship, so let me just put it that way, and the rumination can be on, why did this have to happen? What did I do wrong? How could this have been prevented? Or the rumination could just be on the feeling of pain, the person not being able to sleep because of the thoughts being so focused on the event. So if we examine Psalm 55, and we didn't read all the verses, but when we read further on into Psalm 55, we see that David was going through this situation because he had been betrayed by a friend, a close friend and confidant. So we see that betrayal can be a very, very, very deeply wounding situation. So David's thoughts were probably taken up with, how could my friend have done this thing to me? So another way in which we see thoughts being a trouble is in the area of flashbacks.
So we've talked about this before with things like PTSD or acute stress disorder, where you're suddenly, I think the last show we did on it, we talked about the shopping carts, where you may be in a grocery store, a shopping cart bangs together, and that triggers someone's flashing back to maybe a wartime situation or bombs going off, and you're right there.
Right. So something happens in the present that triggers a flashback of the past. So in those situations, it's not a conscious thought. It is a thought that is happening beneath the conscious level, where a person doesn't even have time to think that, oh, is this a bomb? Just the sound triggers that kind of post-traumatic stress response. But however, with thoughts, there can be flashback of a vivid situation that comes to a person's mind. For people who have been sexually abused, for example, in childhood, as David says, my thoughts trouble me. Their thoughts trouble that the thoughts of such persons become troubling because they flash back almost uncontrollable to a particular scene where they were being raped or where they were being sexually abused, and these thoughts keep coming up as an intrusive memory. So flashback is another way. Another form of thought that can be problematic is recurring nightmares, where someone has recurring nightmares of the situation. So it's as if the mind is not even at sleep, is not totally at rest, because they keep having dreams about the situation. I had one situation in my practice recently where this person talked about having memories of having nightmares, recurring nightmares of being chased. Always being chased and being out of breath and feeling frantic, waking up feeling frantic. And as we explored that, we see that this was actually a memory of being bullied in the schoolyard, being chased by a group of kids and feeling cornered and being fearful because there was no one around to help. So thoughts can take those different forms. But as David talks in verse 2 about, as he said, my thoughts trouble me and I am distraught because of what my enemy is saying. It's as if David is having thoughts of what is actual situation that is outplaying in his life, and he's saying, my thoughts trouble me.
So would negative thought patterns fall into this, or is it something different? Like sometimes you hear about people having this negative narrative in their head where I'm worthless, I'm useless, that thing. Does this fall in this category? Or is that something different?
Absolutely. So if someone has let's put it in the context of David's experience, where he's been betrayed by his close friend and confidant, and he's ruminating on the situation, how he views that situation will decide whether or not it becomes a negative thought pattern. So if David were to say, for example, God has abandoned me, how could God have allowed this to happen? This means that God has abandoned me. Then that's a negative thought that can spiral into further despair and depression. Or if David were to say, there must be something wrong with me as a friend for this to happen to me, the meaning that he attaches to it is very, very important. So to take this situation and to personalize it and to say it is because of me why the situation is happening, that would be an example of a negative thought that is being displayed as a result of this situation. So my job as a cognitive behavior therapist would be to help people challenge those thoughts. Like, is there something, what proof is there that this is because of you, why your friend has abandoned you? Is there another way of looking at the situation? And if we look at the situation that other way, what are the implications? So there are a number of steps that we can take to challenge those negative thoughts and to help a person get beyond them. So if you have just tuned into this show, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio Show. This is Michael Hart of Elam Counselling Services and Melissa Waggott, and today we are talking about overcoming intense emotional pain. And our reference today is from Psalm 55, verse 2 to verse 8, where we're talking about the story of David. If you're not familiar with Elam Counselling Services, you can find out more about us by going to our website at elamcounselingministry.com or by calling us at 613-699-1677. And again, thank you very much for listening to this broadcast.
So we just finished talking about how our thoughts can cause us trouble and how it was causing David trouble in this psalm. But another piece of this psalm that really struck me was how he talks about his heart and how his heart was affected in this situation. Mm-hmm. And he says, my heart is in anguish within me. Mm-hmm. And so my question to you, Michael, is this a literal, my heart is aching, or is it more figurative? Because do you see physiologic symptoms happening when these emotional wounds or emotional pain is being experienced by people?
Mm-hmm. So that's a very good question, Melissa, because when we think of of this sentence where David is saying, "My heart is in anguish within me," it can be looked at. Some people look at this as a sort of figurative language to say, "I have a broken heart as a result of what has happened to me." But one of the symptom of trauma is that or one of the effects of trauma is that there is often a physiological effect as well. And one of the things that I do as part of my EMDR work, it's a branch of therapy that specializes in healing, that deals with trauma victims. And one of the things that we do is to help people identify what's happening within their body. So I would say something, if someone has explained what they have gone through and the traumatic event that they have gone through, and I'm seeing that they are getting in touch with deep emotions, they have a watery eye, or they're starting to cry, or I can see just a sad expression on their face, I would say, so if you should take a scan of your body right now from your head right down to your feet, what's going on in your body? Tell me what's going on. And people would say things like, there is a tightness in the center of my chest. It's as if there is a knot, or there in the pit of my stomach, it's as if I want to, there's a sensation as if I want to throw up. So when we talk about physiological symptoms, it's not just a figurative way of saying my heart is broken, but people who have suffered loss and who are going through intense emotional pain often have these physiological symptoms. And it's very important for therapists who are dealing with that to get in touch with those physiological symptoms. In a speech that I gave recently at one of the universities in Ottawa, speaking to a group of counseling students, and we were talking about the importance of getting in touch and acknowledging, for people to acknowledge what is going on, because by acknowledging it, what David is doing right here is very therapeutic. He's saying, there is actually, my heart is actually going through something right now that is in anguish. So as you begin to identify, it is as if you're giving yourself this power over it to say, it's happening, but I am not too scared to talk about it. What we often find that is dysfunction, people have these kind of physiological symptoms, and they become so afraid of what's going on, so that they just try to pretend as if it's not happening or to push it away. But I'm saying, to get help is to overcome it requires the opposite. And that is why, as a therapist who is trained in trauma work, when I'm dealing with people who are going through these things, we don't skip over it. We talk about it. We rate it. We have a way of measuring it to see how intense it is. Because if by doing this, then in subsequent sessions, when you discuss the trauma again, you want to see if that physiological symptom is still there. So in the some of these clients I talk about who have this pain in the center of their chest, or this symptom when they talk about the traumas, if they want to throw up, several sessions down the road we'll talk about it again, and I'll say, what's going on in your body right now? Can you do a scan from your head right down to your toes, and just tell me what you notice? And they'll say, I don't notice anything right now. And I think that's where there is a breakthrough that's beginning to happen, because it means that the trauma is not having the same power that it once had. So you had asked me about, I think, the physiological symptoms.
No, exactly. And I think it's something that to bring up, because sometimes we think about the emotional wounds and we just think it's all about feelings, but we don't necessarily look at the physiological things that come out. So you described there that aching in the chest. Are there other physiological symptoms people can look out for?
Absolutely. So some of the very common symptoms that we see when someone is going through intense emotional pain, you have things, a racing heartbeat, or someone, their heart begins to beat faster. There's also general aches and pain that a person can have that's just all over their body, just this sense of soreness. This can be caused by stress as well. Fatigue, lethargy, this feeling of being tired all the time. This can be because your body is in high alert from dealing with the stress of what has happened to you or the traumas that has happened to you. So it's as if you're using up your reserves of energy thinking about it, and you become fatigued. There can also be difficulty concentrating, where your mind is just not that sharp.
And it makes sense, actually, when you link it back to those thought things we were talking before.
Mm-hmm.
If you have racing thoughts and your mind is everywhere, being focused at all must be a real challenge.
Absolutely. So this can be very, very difficult, because with the thoughts coming over and over and over again. You might be at work and you're trying to balance that budget, or you're trying to write that report, but all that is coming back to you is the fact that my spouse has walked out on me. Mm-hmm. My children have turned against me. The church that I once belonged to, I am no longer welcome there. There is a falling out. And these things can have tremendous effect on a person's ability to concentrate. So there are very, 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 very concrete physiological symptoms that we see. So if you've just joined us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio Show, and we're talking about overcoming intense emotional pain. And if you're listening to this show and you can identify, if you're saying, I couldn't sleep last night because when you talk about the thoughts, the racing thoughts, I'm having those thoughts. When we talk about flashback, if you've listened to this show and you're saying, yes, my thoughts are troubling me because I'm having these flashbacks, or I'm having nightmares as a result of what happened, I would like to say to you that you can get help. Give us a call at 613-699-1677, and we'll be happy to talk to you about some of the things that you can do. And I see that we have quickly coming to the end of today's show. So one of the things that we're going to do is to continue this show next week, where we're going to look at some of the aspects of this psalm, some of the other things that David talked about in this psalm, and we're going to also look at some of the solutions. Well, I've given some tips today as to how we deal with it and what you need to do if, for example, you're having physiological symptoms. I talked about not denying them, but focusing on them and acknowledging them. But I'm going to give other tips next week as to how to deal with these situations if you find yourself going through that.
So stay tuned for our show next week. And as Michael said, if you're out there and you're identifying with some of these symptoms within yourself, reach out for help. You're not alone. And there is hope beyond this, that you can come through it. So please give us a call if you need more information, and we'd be happy to work with you. 613-699-1677. And if you have a question ahead of next week's show, when we do part 2 of overcoming intense emotional pain, if there's something you'd like us to touch on, or if this show spoke to you in some profound way, please give us a call, and we'd love to hear from you. So until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart of Elam Counselling Services, and Melissa Waggett,
praying that God would bless you in all your relationships and to keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.